Hello and welcome everyone to Building the Ultimate Developer Experience with Compass. This is part of a collection of talks made for the community-led conferences related to Team 2024. This will be presented live at a few locations, but as you have found, this is a virtual version for anyone not able to attend in person. If you've not heard of Compass before, Compass is a standalone new product from Atlassian. It's a developer experience platform. And the product is also in GA, so you can go try this out for yourself on an existing site, or you can provision a new test site and test Compass out there too. But before I forget to introduce myself, my name is Patrick Brady. I'm a senior software engineer on Compass, and I've been with Atlassian for almost 4 years. Here is just a quick legal disclaimer. Alright, so let's get into it. So what are today's goals? I hope that by the end of this talk, you can see the value of a developer experience platform like Compass. You feel comfortable trying Compass out with your company and know the important parts of how to get started. And lastly, that you're aware of how you can customize Compass to fit your company's toolchain using Atlassian's Forge platform. So our agenda for today is going to roughly follow these goals. We'll start out with what is Compass, and then go over how you might set up an instance of Compass on day one, and we'll wrap it up with how you can customize Compass to fit your exact needs. So before we can dive into what Compass can do, it's important to review what problems in general it's trying to solve. So from personal experience, my team maintains many services, and keeping track of all of them is hard. And I'm one of the ones who worked on them and should know all about them. That's not even getting into my sister team's services or platform components that we depend on. Additionally, development teams are expected to own the entire software development lifecycle. This includes building, testing, and deploying code, as well as running operational, observability, and support services. It's a lot of responsibility, and it can be hard for organizations to encourage best practices. Finally, we use a lot of different tools to do our job. I regularly use Bitbucket, Opsgenie, Sentry, Sneak, Splunk, and more just to do my day-to-day work. Knowing about all the tools that your team uses can be challenging, especially for new team members. Additionally, these tools don't have a central portal to show all of the activity, which can make them hard to manage. And if you don't want to take my word for it, here's some data around the impact of not having a central dev portal to house and integrate critical information. Data, information, and documentation can be distributed and hard to locate. Tools end up sprawling, especially at scale, and discoverability of links to different sources and activity is rarely centralized. People often encounter knowledge silos, so beginning to break that down by encouraging documentation, or at least helping guide developers to the right team or person, will help save time. This is why Atlassian has been building Compass, developer experience platform. So it's easy to track all of these services and libraries in a central location rather than in our minds or a Confluence doc or a spreadsheet. You can track how you're meeting company or team standards for your services and visualize data flowing in from all of your other tools in one place. So who will be using Compass and what value might they get out of it? Engineering leaders will be able to use it to gain greater insights into productivity, velocity, and greater visibility into metrics from their team. Managers will be able to see how dev experience is impacting performance and measure their team's health. Platform teams can use Compass to prioritize removing friction for dev teams, standardize cultural practices, and help balance risk and velocity. Developers will also be able to spend less time searching for information and context switching. I think this will all become a bit more clear as we dive into the product. So this is an image here, over here, of a component in the software catalog. So the catalog and this component view is what I consider to be the base of the Compass experience for developers. It's the hub, which contains a lot of information about your component, which may be a service, library, API, stuff like that. It's filled out here with some sample data, so let's take a look at a few key parts of the component. Up here on the top right, we have the ownership related fields. Teams should take ownership of their components by adding the team as the component owner and fill out useful data such as on-call links or how to contact a team in a chat channel like Slack. Other links that are important for users to fill out are repositories, projects, and documentation. These make components more useful for your team as well as for other collaborators looking at your service for more information. Adding links to third-party tools, like a components repo, can also allow related Forge apps to surface more information about that third-party service. We'll get into that a little bit more later. There are also metrics associated with components. To me, they're a large part of what makes components interesting and dynamic. You can track activity related to your service and then log that as numerical values, such as number of open pull requests, deployment frequency, or any custom metric you want to set up, like the cups of coffee the devs drink a day. Scorecards you can set up on your catalog help you understand your component health and track how you're meeting your team or company standards. Scores are automatically calculated by component metadata, such as the presence of links or values of metrics. There's a lot of configurability with scorecards that I won't be covering today, but I'd encourage you to check them out in more detail in the product or in our documentation. The activity feed is a tab on the left-hand side of the screen, which provides visibility into what's happening with your components, and importantly, what's happening with your dependencies. You can see deployments, incidents, alerts, feature flag changes, and more. So if I'm an engineer responding to an alert, I can come here to see recent activity across our services and across services that we might depend on that may be having issues as well. Generally, you'll need to set up some sort of ingestion for this data to get it flowing in to populate the feed. We're going to touch more on a few options for this a little bit later in the talk. And speaking of apps, we have a bunch of different ones that you can install. So we've built many apps already, like Bitbucket, GitHub, GitLab, Opsgenie, PagerDuty, and more. These are one of the mechanisms that you can use to get activity onto that activity feed. We've also had partners build apps to integrate with their product, like Swim and Tidelift. Partners like Utility have also built an AWS app that you can install and use as well. So that's a quick pitch on sort of what Compass is and how it might be useful. So let's take a look at how a newer customer can get set up using Compass in practice. To make sure I stay on track with time and that I can showcase all the important elements of Compass, I've pre-recorded my screen for the demo sections. I'll be narrating them live to you for this presentation. So let's get into it. So the three main parts that we found of utilizing Compass effectively are: 1, setting up the catalog to be representative of your services and architecture. This means configuring a mechanism to get data coming in from your third-party tools to give you important metrics about each of your services. This can be done from an app or from a webhook. Also, assigning the correct owner team as the owner of components will allow them to see their activity in the team dashboard and to better track their responsibilities and team health. Part of that team health is building health scorecards and templates to make Compass an important part of maintaining and building healthy services. So let's take a dive into what this looks like in the product. So one of the hardest parts that customers have mentioned to us is getting the catalog set up with useful information. So we've invested some time in developing ways to make this process easier to get started from day one. So let's take a look at the current options available for import. Here we have the following options in the UI. We have Bitbucket, GitHub, GitLab, New Relic, and then also Jira Software, Jira Service Management, and CSV files. Behind the scenes, those bottom three are actually native integrations. They're built in and ready to go from day one. The top 4 shown here are actually Forge apps that you can install. Only Compass product admins have permissions to install and configure apps, so it's important to install and configure these early when setting up your catalog. Once they're configured, standard users who aren't admins can use that tool to do importing themselves without needing admin permissions. We're also rolling out continuous import right now in several of our apps, which allow Compass to stay up to date with your new repos as they're created automatically. Each app is different, so definitely check out their documentation. And if you want to see all the apps currently available for Compass, you can head to the Apps tab. Marketplace support for free Compass apps was just released as part of Team 24. This will make the process smoother for distributing apps, as well as is the first step towards paid app support in Compass. You can see we have a variety of apps available, some built by the Compass team at Atlassian, and others have been built by partners. So I'm now going to walk through a demo of installing and configuring the Bitbucket app. Since I'm an admin on the site, I can install it and then click Configure. So here, the area that I'm tracing with my mouse is all UI that's being rendered by the Forge app. So none of this is actually Compass UI. This is all app controlled. So by clicking Connect, I'm starting the flow to authenticate with Bitbucket, and I'm going to choose the CLC demo workspace to connect with. And we can see that it was now connected to Compass. So let's select some repositories to import. So as you can see here, we don't have a lot of repositories in this workspace. And this screen is also accessible via the import button in the Create dropdown. So you can use the search here to search for projects within your workspace, and you can also search for specific repositories. For instance, you can find the import me repository by searching import here. So let's select this, and you can also choose the component type. Here I'll choose the machine learning model, and we'll select this for import. So this step here is talking about config as code. I don't really have time to go over it in this presentation, but it's essentially managing your components in your source control management tool, in this case Bitbucket, in a YAML file. So I'm going to skip this, but I'd encourage you to set this up if your organization is looking to lock component changes in the UI by users and have changes only go through the code. So let's get started with the import. All right, looks like the import was complete. And as you can see, the import me component has been added. It's filled out, ready to go with the repository link and some starting metrics as well. As you can see, I haven't really set up the repo with any interesting data with builds and deployments, but that would be pulled in as well when importing this component. But sometimes it can be hard to get your Compass admin to install and configure apps. They may be hard to get a hold of, or they may not also be an admin in the corresponding tool. So we want to make sure that customers in this situation still have a way to power events and metrics coming in that make Compass interesting and dynamic, and just useful as well for developers. So there's now incoming webhooks that you can create and then configure by adding that webhook to the third-party tool. This allows Compass to easily ingest activity from those repos, turning them into Compass events without any scripting or API usage needed on your end. This way I can see build and deployment events from Bitbucket, GitHub, GitHub Enterprise, or GitLab, and see metrics associated with those deploys and builds without needing an app. Again, our Forge apps are able to provide more functionality, but this will help you get around any limitations with getting apps and give you some quicker time to value. Also, if you have suggestions on what provider to support for incoming webhooks next, please reach out to me or reach out in the product. We would love to hear about what tools you're using and what you'd like to see support for. Awesome, so now we know a bit more about how to get started in Compass. So let's take a look at some of the ways that you can get started customizing Compass using our APIs or even by building your own apps. I'll also include a quick demo towards the end of spinning up an app from scratch to show how easy it can be to develop in Forge. So we don't have apps for everything yet. Maybe you use a really cool setup on Jenkins, or your company has an internal tool, or maybe you want to build an integration for a creative use case using Compass. Well, I have good news for you. Our APIs are entirely publicly available, and making a Forge app is easier than ever. So what I'm going to go over now is how you can find documentation about our APIs, and then show how you or your dev team can easily get started building a private or public app for your company to tightly integrate with your ecosystem. So as you may know, Forge apps can interact with products through Forge modules. All the Compass modules and their documentation is captured in the Forge docs. There's going to be some links on the bottom of the slides. These are links that will navigate you to the webpage being shown here. So I'm going to show you a bit more about one of these modules, the component page module. I'm not going to have time to go over the other four modules here, but I'd encourage you to check them out if you're curious and have some time. So this is a component page. At this point, we know it and love it. And on the left-hand side here, you can see that there's a section for apps. So every component page module present on the site is going to add a new tab on this left-hand side of the screen. Clicking on it will bring you to the actual extension point page where you can show UI directly related to the component being viewed. So I've highlighted the area where the app can render UI here in blue. So all of that real estate is controlled by the app to display whatever UI they want. We also saw this on the Bitbucket configuration process. I didn't highlight it in blue, but that area was also UI provided by the app. So on this page here, the component ID is present, so we can retrieve all the information about this specific component using the API from within the Forge app. Also, as a bonus, this is actually a screenshot from our internal instance of Compass here at Atlassian. As you can see, we have built out lots of different modules that Atlassians can use to interact with our services. I regularly use these extensions to manage our services like running DB migrations, managing our AWS queues, and updating key info in other Atlassian systems as well. So now let's briefly go over the Compass API. So this here is a screenshot from our developer docs. The URL here says go.atlassian.com. Sorry that my face is covering it. But Atlassian has a GraphQL API that allows you to interact with all sorts of products like Jira, Bitbucket, Opsgenie, and Compass. If you don't know, GraphQL is a query language for APIs. And you can think of it as an alternative to REST APIs if you're familiar with that. All of Compass's API functionality is publicly available in GraphQL. It covers everything from creating components, querying scorecard values, to initializing event sources. We do have a few REST API endpoints. You can see there's a tab for that up at the top of this documentation page, but those are mainly focused on consuming events and metrics and don't cover all of our APIs. You can see on the second tab, we also have a Forge GraphQL toolkit. So this is a library where we've written out common GraphQL queries and mutations, so Compass Forge app developers can use the library to call the API instead of explicitly writing out the query for every request. All right, so this is a quick demo on using the GraphQL Explorer. So you can just append Gateway API GraphQL to your Atlassian site and get to this page. So you can see here, I'm looking at the Compass APIs, and what I'm going to do here is build a query to get information about this component. So I'm going to copy the component ID, go back to the GraphQL gateway, and I can paste that ID in here. Now I'm going to specify what information about this component that I want to retrieve. So here I'm looking at the scorecards. I'm going to get the scorecard name, and then I also want the score from this scorecard. So I can click execute query to run it, and I can see that there's for this component, StoreDB, the component readiness has a score of 60, which we can verify here in the UI. You can also run mutations using GraphQL. It's not just queries. So let me add a new mutation. So there are, as you can see, tons of mutations available. I definitely don't have time to go over all of them, but you can see things like delete component link or create webhook. So now that we've gotten a peek at Compass's APIs, let's see if we can put just one of them to use in a real application. So I'm going to be making a quick app to change a component description from a component page module. This is the module that we were looking at earlier. So we're going to build some UI to enter a new description and then run an API call to actually do the change. Since I don't want to bore you with watching me type in the video, I'm going to be, again, recording it, but I'll be voicing over what's happening live. The language is going to be in like JavaScript, TypeScript. It's going to look very similar to React as well. So those of you who know this language might find it familiar. Those of you who don't worry, I'll guide us through the important parts that we're covering here. So to get started making a new app, I'd highly encourage you to visit the Forge documentation first. There's some Hello World tutorials, which I'd highly recommend doing if you're new to Forge, but I've already got everything that I need installed on my computer and ready to go. So let's get started. All right, so here I have a terminal and I'm going to run Forge create. This is going to start the creation of an app from one of the existing templates. I'll use the name CLC demo, choose UI kit, and select Compass and the Compass component page template. So this is going to be using the Compass component page module that we were looking at earlier. This is the documentation for it. You can see there's a bunch of different properties, as well as the extension context, which is going to contain the component ID. We're going to be using this later in the demo, so important to note now. All right, so let's head back to the terminal and it looks like the template has finished downloading. So let's open an editor to make some modifications. So there's going to be 3 key files we'll be looking at today. The first one's going to be the front-end index file. So this is going to declare the UI. So as you can see, we have hello world and then loading as well. So it's only going to say loading until this backend function resolves, and that data is going to be replaced. So if we take a look at the index file in the resolver, we can see that it's going to log the request, and then it's going to return hello world. The last file that is important to keep an eye on is the manifest file. So this is going to declare the modules that our app is using, as well as the permissions that the app has. In this case, we're using read and write Compass component. So let's get started by deploying our Forge app. So by running Forge deploy, what it's going to do is it's going to bundle up all of the app code and send it up to the cloud, to the remote instance where it can be invoked and run by different Atlassian sites. So I just copied the URL of my Atlassian site that we'll be testing on. And once it's been deployed, you can install it on just one site, or you can install it on many different sites as well. So we'll run Forge install. We'll choose Compass as the product, and then paste in the URL of the site. You do have to be an admin and accept the permissions that the app uses for the site that you're installing it on. All right, but looks like that worked. We have the CLC demo app here in the apps, and if we go to one of our components, we can see that the new tab has been added. And looking at the UI, the first hello world renders, and then it was loading for a moment, and then the second call from the backend came through. So looks like that's all working successfully, which is awesome. So what I'm running now is Forge Tunnel. So this will allow you to live reload the changes that you're making to the app code to sites that it's installed on. This makes the development process a lot quicker. You don't need to deploy it again every time. So for this next part, we're going to be calling the Compass APIs. The easiest way to do this from Forge is to use our GraphQL toolkit that we've built with a ton of common queries and mutations that you might use. So we're going to install this package from npm, and while that's running, we'll copy over the import statement. So we're going to be importing the GraphQL gateway object from the SDK here. This is the object which we need to call to be able to make requests. So we're going to need to make our backend call asynchronous. Since it's an API request, we need to be awaiting it. So my autopilot was getting in my way a little bit. It was trying to be helpful, but it wasn't quite right. So we have GraphQL gateway, and then we're going to say .compass to get to the Compass namespace, and then as app, which will mean that the app is going to operate with the app permissions. As you can see, there was a lot of different options for the functions to call, but we'll be using update base component today. The ID that we're specifying here is the component ID. So we can get that from the context that we were looking at earlier. So we can say request context extension component ID, which I misspelled, but there we go. And what's nice about using the SDK is you can actually inspect the different types to see what we're allowed to input. So we can see here that description is one of the allowed inputs, and it autofills as well. which is really nice. So we can put in just a simple string that says new description. So now when the app is loaded on the component page, it should update the description to new description, and then it should say done. So we'll save that file, and we can see that the tunnel is ready and listening for requests. So let's go back to our site, give it a refresh, and we can see that it's done. And if we go to the overview, we'll see the new description. All right, so hopefully this has all shown you how truly customizable Atlassian products are by customers. Your apps can remain private, specific to your company, or you can reach out to us to help get your app published for others to use on the marketplace and potentially to monetize in the future. There are also several different options for UI for your apps, including custom UI, which allows more customization within an iframe environment. So definitely do a bit more research into Forge. It's a really awesome platform that my team was excited to use. If you're looking for more information about more complex apps, our GitLab app is much more developed, but you'll see it all has the same base in Forge. This app is also open sourced, so I'm not spilling any company secrets by showing this to you all. You can go look at the source code of this app whenever you want. It's hosted on GitHub. We think that having a production-ready app is, as an example, will help guide and inspire developers on how to use the Compass modules in our SDK. So here's a resources slide. This will contain a link to this presentation and the others presented at these community-led conferences for Team 24. So be sure to check that out. And if at any point in your Compass journey you have questions or feature requests, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us in product through Intercom, which is the bubble in the corner down there, and someone will be able to support you. So that's all I have to share with you all today. I hope you learned something new about Compass, Forge, or both. So thank you so much for letting me have some of your time and for listening in.